Friends, I need to pull myself together. After this morning, I cried 4 times. Okay, so yes, I decided that I wanted to do a different presentation. So I did, and I panicked people, and everything's gonna be okay.
I hope so.
So I was really thinking about this resilience thing, because this is a word that can we put it on presenter? Okay. This was, because I just made this presentation.
Yep.
This is a word that really connects to me, because I think that if there's something that I can, this is something that if I were to attach a word to how I got to where I am today, I can attach it to resilience, but even more than that, it was how did I get it? How do you get to be resilient? And so I was really thinking about this, and I've been doing a lot of traveling, and so I have a lot of time to think. And I was trying to think about, how do we support resilience in kids? And Marie and I were interviewed just a few days ago on Longhouse Radio, and the word failure came up. Failure, and I've heard this before. People will be like, "Well, kids need to fail. That's how they get resilient." And I was like, and it didn't sit right with me, because if you've heard me speak before, you know how I feel like kids should be able to get the supports before they fail. That's one of my core beliefs. And so I was really playing with the language and trying to figure out what resilience means and how we can build it without kids feeling the failure. Can they do it, right? And so I was really struggling with this. I Googled resilience, and I'm like, what is this thing? And some words stood out to me. So I see recover, I see spring back, this idea of being tough, and I'm like, so maybe you do have to fail? Because you have to kind of not do okay to come back. Do you know what I mean? So I'm like, I don't know, I still don't like that word. And then when we were on the radio, another word came up, and it was the word adversity. And I was like, maybe this is what we need to feel. You mean to go over here? Okay. And so I'm just like, maybe this is the word I'm looking for, because I don't have the same kind of emotional response to the word adversity as I do to the word failure. And so I'm like, maybe the question is now, how do we create those supportive environments for kids so they can face adversity without failing? And it's this window. And I think it's a very important window, because if it gets too much, I think it's almost too far. And so then when I was thinking about this, and I'm like, well, we have to really think about then what are the supports then we're talking about when we're talking about these supportive environments. And I looked up kind of what we traditionally look up as supports for kids, and this came up. This is the adaptations and modifications list of supports. Although this doesn't look like a list to me, this looks like really strict compartmentalized boxes. And it's almost just like we look at these and we're like, okay, so this kid gets this one and this kid gets this one, and I'm like, that seems so inefficient. So you know that I love my metaphors, so I'm like, you know what this kind of looks like? Cupcakes. Logically. And I'm like, this is what we do in school. We send kids to the cupcake that they need. You need to eat from this cupcake, so go to the cupcake, go to the ELL cupcake, go to the First Nations cupcake. This happens all the time, right? And I'm like, here's the problem though, our cupcakes are getting smaller, especially in British Columbia. And, sorry about that. And so then I'm like, the cupcakes are getting smaller and more kids are eating from more than one cupcake. Remember the movie with the Chilean miners who are trapped underground, right? When I think about this, there's one scene in the movie where all 35 of the grown men had to share one saltine cracker. I'm like, this is kind of what we're dealing with in our province right now. And I'm like, there's got to be a better way. There's not enough crackers for everybody. There's not enough cupcakes for everybody. So then I was thinking about this, and I'm like, you know what we need to move to is we need to move away from this idea that only certain kids get certain supports. Because if we really want to create these supportive learning environments, it's got to be less about you get this and you get this. I mean, it's a logistical nightmare. And move to, ready? The layered support cake of love. Because when you look at it this way, every support is available, every kid gets a slice, but you get different sizes of slices. Yes, so then I was like, but if you look at support this way, this is no longer sending kid to the cupcakes. This is bringing the cake to them. And so it's moving away from this model of, we have to have these experts that we send kids to, and rather we bring the experts to the kids. This is not an expert model, this is a multiple expertise model. And so when I'm thinking about this, I'm like, well, what is this layered rainbow cake of love? Friends, this is universal design. And so when I'm working in my schools and I'm trying to teach people about supports and work with schools to create supports, I think about, when we're moving away from the cupcake to the layered cake model, this is the layered cake. But sometimes we still look at this as cupcakes, right? Oh, you're tier 1, you go over there to get your cupcake. Oh, you're tier 2, go over here to get your, I'm like, we have to think of it more as everyone gets a slice of all 3 of these supports, but kids get different sizes of slices. So I think that we're really, really good in education at acknowledging what supports kids need, but what we still have a hard time with is letting go of the fact that more than just those kids can have those supports. We kind of have this weird, supports is cheating mentality. It's very bizarre. And so when I was learning about this, there was this experience that I went through that I'm going to tell you about. And it happened a few years ago, and how I kind of understood this idea of universal design for learning and how creating these environments of support can really help kids to take risks and be successful, but it can still be hard, right? And so the year that I really realized this, I was working at a high school, and every year there was Christmas parties, really huge Christmas parties. They were so famous, these Christmas parties, that we had to find a new location every year because we weren't invited back to the previous one. And so at this particular Christmas party, and there would be similar events every year. Every year there'd be a 50-50 draw, there'd be a dance party, there'd be door prizes and things. But the 50-50 was never actually a prize because if you win in the 50-50 and don't give it back, you look like a big jerk. So I like to call it the trick 50-50. So the trick 50-50 for this particular year was the Ride to Conquer Cancer. Remember, has anyone done the Ride to Conquer Cancer? Don't do it, just give them your money. You did it! You're gonna love this story 3 times. Sounds like you trained. Okay, so I'm at this party and the 50-50 gets not given away. And the teacher who was organizing it said, you know what, more than this, we're gonna bring a team together to ride this, and we're gonna raise money together and we're gonna ride our bikes. So if you don't know, the ride is from Vancouver to Seattle. And I'm hearing this and I'm like, I did a triathlon 25 years ago. This is no problem. Seattle's south. That's just a giant downhill. This is going to be so easy. So I'm like, oh, I'll do it. No problem. I can do it. It's not downhill, is it? Nope. And so that was in January, and the ride was in June. And so I'm like, oh, that's so much time. So I have a really nice bike. I picked up my spandex. I was ready. But I was also really busy. So when my team went on training rides, I was like, I'll catch you next time. I did a triathlon once, and the bike was the easiest. So it's gonna be fine. It's gonna be fine. So the first red flag, however, when I realized that this might have been a bad idea, was when first I had to be in Surrey at 6:30 in the morning. Which, if you know me at all, is very hard because I'm tier 3 before 10 every day. Which is why I'm presenting now and not as the opener. Thank you, Trevor. And so I get there and I'm like, oh, this is really early. And but you look out and you see all these people, right? And so it's quite inspirational because everyone's in the same spandex, right? And so it's powerful spandex movement. But if you're a survivor, everyone has a bright yellow flag on their bike. So you're looking across and it's hundreds and hundreds, if not thousands of people. And you see this landscape of resiliency is basically what you're looking at, right? And so I'm like, you know what? This is going to be great. It's going to be okay. So we start riding, and I'm like, wow, this is hard. There's a lot of hills on the way to Seattle. So I'm like, but you know what? This isn't a race. I can take my time. So my new strategy was to just, spend extra time at the check stops. Have an extra juice box, make some friends. Until the check stops started closing before I got there. And I was like, oh, this isn't good. So now I'm starting to get that worried feeling. And then when I started to really get concerned was when a guy on a unicycle passed me. I swear there was a 6-year-old on training wheels that passed me. A woman who I swear was pregnant and ready at any moment in time passed me. And I was like, maybe I should have trained for this. So I'm riding, and it's a really long day, and the check stops are closed, and there's no one around. It's just rural Washington. It's me and the cows. There is nobody. There's no service. I can't call my mom. I can't play Pokemon Go. There is nothing to do. I am tired. I am sore. I am angry with myself. And then guess what happens? Of course it rains. So then I'm sitting on the side of the road because I've given up at this point in time, and I'm sitting there and I'm crying, and I'm like, okay, I'm gonna look for a place to sleep because obviously I'm not moving from this spot and no one is here to help me. So I'm sitting there and, dusk is happening. And I'm like, this is a bad situation. But then a van pulls up beside me. And I was like, I'm in the middle of rural Washington, I don't really know how to feel. And he rolls down his window and he's like, do you want to ride? And I was like, I have 2 responses. Heck yes, and stranger danger. I'm like, what am I going to do? But then, before I could answer, he says, you know what, that's actually not a question. You have to come with me because I'm the sweeper van. And I was like, thank you, Jesus. I say to him, I'm like, my bike's over there, you need to deal with it. And I get into the van. If you know me at all, you know that when life gets overwhelming, I need a nap. And there just happened to be a pillow on the front bench, and I grab it and I go pass out in the back because I cannot deal with life. And he drives me to base camp. Oh, because this is a 2-day bike ride. So I'm just horrified with myself. I'm ready to hitchhike home. But then again, we get to base camp, and there's these amazing stories of people who have survived and families talking about people who haven't. And I finally have a little pep talk with myself. I'm like, Shelley Moore, you are healthy. You aren't fit, but you are healthy. You do not have cancer. You took advantage of yourself, you took advantage of your health and your body. You are going to suffer because you deserve it. Get on the bike tomorrow and you are not going to stop, and you are going to ride your bike to Seattle. Enough is enough, quit your riding. This is my little pep talk to myself. So the next day I wake up, I'm ready, I'm feeling good. I'm like, I can do it. I get on my bike, I'm like, I can do this. I can't do it. I cannot do it. So friends, I don't know if you have gone on a bike after not riding it for 5 years. It's not your legs that are sore. It's not your arms, not your neck. The only sense of relief that I could imagine was buying a cold raw steak and putting it on my seat. So then I'm trying to side saddle my way to Seattle. If I see a hill, I completely give up at this point, and I get off and just walk up the hill like a cowboy, I might add. But you know what? I'm like, you know what? Who said that I had to ride a bike during the bike ride? There's no rule that says how I get to Seattle. So I'm like, no, I'm not going to give up. I'm going to walk. I'm going to crawl because I committed to this. I will never do it again. But now what do I know is coming? The sweeper van. So I am telling myself to keep going like this. And But of course, now that I know it's coming, it's taking like 35 times longer. Like an hour is like 6 hours. And I'm like, oh man, the check stops are still closed. And so I was just like, I'm just disappointed in myself, is really what it was. It was a moment of just like, I was really ashamed that I had put myself in this situation. So sure enough, guess who pulls up beside me, rolls down his window. I totally thought I was gonna run into you today. It's like, thanks, Mr. Sweeper Van driver. And so I get in the sweeper van, and I'm feeling less overwhelmed today and more just reflective. And so him and I start talking, and he's just like, so tell me why you did this. I'm like, that's a really good question. And I'm like, I think, I don't know, like for people who are over 30 might experience this, but there was a moment after I turned 30, because I grew up playing sports, I grew up playing field hockey, and I remember after 30, seeing the ball, and my head was like, you can get there. But my body was like, nope. And I got turf burns, and I rolled, it was horrible. It was dramatic and horrible. And I'm like, it was kind of like one of those moments. Like my head was like, you're young, you're invincible, sign up, it'll be fine. And then my body was like, nope. You can't do that anymore, Shelley. And so we're talking about this, and he's just kind of laughing. He's like, well, you know what? I brought you something. I brought you a present. And I'm like, you were that confident? So he pulls out of his bag an ice cold Pepsi. And it wasn't really a Pepsi. And I was just like, oh, thank you so much. Like, I'm going to drink this later, but thank you so much for this ice cold Pepsi. And so we were talking or whatever, and he's just listening. He was really, really kind and very nice. And then all of a sudden, he stops the van. He's like, okay, get out now. And I'm like, what? I'm like, did I offend you? Like, are you upset? He's like, no. Like, just, if you get out of the van, there's a path on the left there. Like, just, the finish line is just through those trees. And I'm like, I can't do that. That's cheating. I can't. You drove me 80% of the way on a bike ride. Like, I can't cross the finish line. You were driving me to the parking lot so I can get on the bus to go home. No, there's no finish line. He's like, Shelley, he's like, what are the goals of today? And I'm like, to ride your bike. He says, no. He's like, well, that's part of it. He's like, but what the goal of today is, you cannot go on this bike ride unless you raise the money for the cause. Did you raise your share of the money? I'm like, yes, I raised my share of the money. He's like, did you experience something emotionally and physically difficult? And I was like, it's possible. And he's just like, those are the goals. He's like, did you reflect on this? Did you learn from this? Did you feel inspired by this? And I'm like, yeah. He's like, you deserve to cross that finish line like everybody else here. I'm like, I don't know about this, but I'll do it. And I'm riding my bike, and I'm like, this has got to be a metaphor for something in here. I just don't know what it is. So I go, and I cross the finish line. Everyone cheers for me. They have no idea. I pose with my bike above my head for the photo. It was the greatest moment of my life. Okay, let's just talk about the supports that were in place for me that day. Number one, there was a sweeper van. Now, that sweeper van was not designed for me. That sweeper van was designed for the woman in case she went into labor. That sweeper van was designed for an injury or, someone who collapsed or their bike was broken. That was not designed for me, the person who didn't train. But on the day of the ride, I had access to it because I needed it. No one was left on the road. Can you imagine a Superman pulled up beside me as I was sitting there crying in the rain, being like, why are you here? Oh, you didn't train? Sorry. And kept driving? No. But you know what? That wasn't even enough for me that day. I also needed a nap. That pillow wasn't designed for me. That pillow was designed to elevate someone's leg because it was broken. But the super van driver did not come and pull that pillow from under my head because, no, you're breaking nothing. You don't deserve a nap. That wasn't even designed for me. I also needed an ice-cold Pepsi. And it's very possible that that was designed for me. It's very possible. And so, here I am. I did it! I did it! Look how svelte I am. I should not train for a bike ride more often. So anyways, so like it really hit me. I'm just like, how many times do we design supports for kids and then just be like, oh, you know what? You don't need this. This isn't for you. The example that I love is, how many of you put winter tires on your car? Yeah? Okay. So tell me about this. When you go put your winter tires on your car, does the tire man say, oh, you can't have that, it's cheating? Do they say that? Anyone? No? How about this? Do they say, winter tires? You need to prove you need them. Definitely. My favorite is, would they ever say to you, winter tires, but you're going to lose the skill of bald tire driving? Funny, that's never happened to me. So then I think to myself, like, what makes you a good driver is knowing when you need the winter tires. Right? And you know what? Even if you had studs on your tires all year, it's not going to hurt anyone. It's just going to be more expensive. So, thinking about this, like, how do we teach kids not if they need supports, but when they need the supports? So, I shared this story the other day, and a teacher came up to me, and she's just like, I want to tell you something, but I'm worried it'll insult you. And I'm like, oh, trust me. If I'm going to stand up here and tell these stories, I'm ready for anything. And she's just like, well, I showed this to my staff at a high school, and someone stood up and said, she didn't deserve to cross the finish line. She didn't train. And I was just like, oh, that was harsh. And she's like, yeah, but I stood up to him. I'm like, well, thank you. What did you say? And she's like, because I realized that as teachers, it's not our job to decide if kids cross the finish line. It's our job to determine when they cross the finish line and what supports they need to get there. That is supporting kids to be successful, right? And so, I mean, like, this is a great story. I love this story. Like, I love it. But the part of the story that's the most profound, I haven't even told you yet. Because this happened, and one of our team members of 9 was our principal. His name is Lauren Bodine, and you may have heard of him or know him well. And he was our principal on this bike ride, and within 6 months of this bike ride, he got cancer and had passed away within the year. Our school shattered. Because he was like one of those administrators that you love to work for. You're just like, because he just believed that every student could be one person who crossed the finish line. Every teacher had potential to learn and grow to support kids to cross the finish line. And it just was like, it was devastating. And I didn't really get it. And then after he passed and we kind of celebrated his life, I realized that, the biggest goal that I met on this ride, I had no idea until a year later when I realized that the biggest goal that I met was that this was the last thing that him and I did together. This was the last time that him and I experienced something together without the fear of cancer. And now that is the part that I hold in my pocket. That's the part that is significant and why this was important to me, this ride. And so I think we get really, really caught up in the details of the bike ride, and we forget that it's not about the bike ride. Because sometimes the benefits of bringing people together and supporting them to be successful, the goals that they're going to meet, we may not even see or realize till 6 months, a year, or 10 years down the road. And so it's really important for us to remember that, because the magic that comes out when you bring people together and support them to be successful, it's magical. Because you meet goals you can't even anticipate will even be important until later on. And so here he is. Here's our guy. He was a professional biker. He biked hills on purpose. And I think to myself, if I was prevented from going on that ride because of my ability or lack of, we would have never had this experience together. And it didn't harm him, me being a part of that. It actually enhanced it because he also had that memory of us doing this together, right? It's not about the bike ride. There's a memorial ride for him every year called the Lauren Bodine Ride that is very special. So in education, we're really used to calling supports adaptations and modifications, and these are often what we see in the cupcakes in those boxes, right? And I'm encouraging you to think about if we want to build resilience and have kids be successful to cross the finish line, we really need to move away from supports are only for certain kids. And so I'm encouraging you to use the word inclusive supports. Because it's not if kids need supports, it's teaching kids when they need them to be successful. And you can design them for specific kids, like we know there are certain supports that are going to benefit certain kids. But what you know that inclusion is working when kids are using supports that they don't know are designed for them, because everyone has access to them, right? And it's releasing ourselves the burden of trying to regulate this. It's exhausting. It's exhausting. Because this is what we usually do. We usually have planning where tier 1 is no supports. And then we have adaptations and modifications. This is typically how we plan, especially as kids get older. Here's my visual to help you remember that this is not the way. No! How about instead we think about this as a layered cake of rainbow love? We start with supports for everybody. These are your universal supports. When we talk about universal design, this is the supports they designed for the bike ride. Everyone had access to them. And instead of using the language of even universal adaptations and modifications, I encourage you to use this more scientifically precise language. Supports, and even more supports. Because a support is actually what you put in place so that kids can do this later on without you. And that's the resilience. That's the bounce back. That is the thank you for the support, now I'm going to try it. So why we wait until after kids fail to give them the supports blows my mind. Because we are letting go. That example that Monique shared today about the little guy who brought 25 people to school, like what a perfect example of this. Supports until you are ready, not figure it out and prove you need them, right? Because, my friends, I saw this on Twitter the other day, and I think that this really speaks to me because I think that this pretty much describes a lot of where I came from in my life, but I'm going to read it to you. I woke myself up because we ain't got an alarm clock, dug in the dirty clothes basket because nobody washed my uniform, brushed my hair and teeth in the dark because the lights ain't on, even got my baby sister ready because my mama wasn't home, got us both to school on time to eat us a good breakfast. Then when I got to class, the teacher fussed because I ain't got a pencil. Give them the pencil! So I encourage you every day, every week, every year, what is your sweeper van so that no child is ever left behind on the side of the road? So that they can go through their day and their school and career always knowing that if they look over their shoulder, there will be a sweeper van there to pick them up. Can you imagine the courage of a learner and the confidence of a learner in high school growing up in a system where they had this type of security to take risks, right? There's so many kids that are left behind, and it's heartbreaking because no child will be harmed by too many supports, but so many kids have been harmed because they don't have enough. Because guess what, my friends? It isn't even about the bike ride. We get so caught up in the bike ride, but you know what it is about? It is about the journey of the bike ride. It is about the learning of the bike ride. It is about the life lessons of the bike ride, and it's about Lord. And these are the lessons I didn't realize till way later. So, my advice to you, release yourself the burden of the regulation of supports and go forth and let the supports be with you.